I like thinking about the people that are going to eat it and feeling, you know, in the groove with the ingredients, which after all, they're the connection to the whole world. Even one of the things I think is no one ever eats alone. Even if you're by yourself eating something out of a can, somebody raised that food, somebody
Yes.
canned it, somebody designed the label, somebody brought it to the groceries and put it on the shelf and rang it up for you. And you are always connected when you eat, even if you're not conscious of it.
Hello, I'm Derek Cash with the North Little Rock Public Library System and want to welcome you to Meet the Author. Joining us today is the multi-talented, best-selling James Beard and Coretta Scott King award-winning author, Crescent Dragonwagon, to discuss the 30th anniversary edition of Dairy Hollow House Soup and Bread, a Country Inn Cookbook. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh yes, I honestly can say that I've never read such an entertaining cookbook in my life. Well, you chuckle, but it's because most cookbooks are very good, they're very well written, but it's just the information and it can sometimes be dry. I need to make a pecan pie. You go tell a lot of stories in your book, which made it even more entertaining. And so we know a little bit about you, your life, etc. So I just wanted to start off by praising the book and
Thank
your
you.
writing style for that. I was really enchanted by it.
Thank you so much. I sometimes say, I mean, I write in a lot of different genres professionally, but I sometimes say in this one that I'm not a culinary author or a cookbook author per se. I'm a writer. I write about life, and in some of my books, I write about it through food as the lens, and what a multi-dimensional lens it is. It's, you know, it covers everything from family to spirituality to celebration to grieving, uh, to our connection to weather, to climate, to our location. It's and and often when I am teaching writing to culinary writers, and I will hear them demur and say, "Oh, I'm just a cookbook author," and I say, "Really? Animals die so that you can have your roast beef that keeps you alive. It's life and death. This is not just cookbook writing. It's part of, so yes, I do tell stories. I do give in, and cookbook writing is unusual because on the one hand, it's how to, it's very precise. My husband is a longtime cyber defender and has developed a lot of software. And one of the things he said to me once when we were first going out together, he had read a cornbread recipe of mine, and he said, "It's like really good coding," which made me laugh. But a recipe sort of has to be that because you have to tell you're making an implicit promise to the reader, do what I am telling you to do with the ingredients I've described and the tools and the oven being to temp, and you will have a guaranteed result. You don't want the kitchen equivalent of like when you're trying to run a program and the beach balls of death circles for 20 minutes. Um, so on the one hand, it's very practical, uh, left brain kind of stuff in the recipes, but really, as you said, it doesn't have to, but it's much more interesting when it includes stories and background and digressions. But the recipes have to be straight and narrow.
Mhm, mhm. You know, something that just popped into my mind, something I really liked about the book and didn't even realize it until this very moment. I'm not making fun of magazines like Better Homes and Gardens or Good Housekeeping, but they always have those professional photographers take pictures of that perfect looking cake. And I will make it, and mine doesn't look like it. And I feel so frustrated by it because I'm thinking I didn't do something wrong, or if I were more artistic. If I recall from your book, I don't want to take from it, but you've got drawings so that however it turns out, it's perfect for you as long as you follow the instructions that you give. And I think that's a blessing because that way the person who's reading it doesn't get frustrated. Why can't my book, my roast or soup look like hers? You don't have to worry about it as long as it tastes great and whatever. And so thank you for that. I think it puts a relief on a lot of people.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you said that because I actually happen to prefer cookbooks with illustrations and not even the how-to illustrations, although you might need them if, you're making turnovers and you have to
Mm,
show how the dough gets folded into a triangle.
mhm.
But but I prefer them without, and it's sort of against the tide. Everyone likes the so-called food porn, and to me, it's not it doesn't work for me. And I think it is intimidating to many people. And having worked with professional food photographers when I did a food shoot in magazines, sometimes they do things to make it look good that, you wouldn't really want to eat. And the publisher made the decision rather than me, but I happen to love those kind of woodcut looking illustrations that they did. And the other thing about full color photographs, like so many people like, is it raises the cost of production.
Ah,
It's much harder, color photography and all the chemicals that it takes, it's harder on the planet as well. And you can go online and see beautiful pictures if that's what you want, if that's what you need. But you and I are probably in minority on that. A lot of people want, and we did put some black and white photographs that tell the personal story in the anniversary edition. And but no, I'm with you on that. And I like the kind of food and the kind of dishes that the moment you get awestruck is when you put the bite in your mouth and you go, oh, this is really good. More than like when it gets set on the table and it's got, layers and frou-frou and you go, oh, how beautiful. That's not really my kind of cooking
uh-huh.
or kind of eating experience. I would rather have it be you go home thinking about the taste and you kind of can't wait till you have it again,
Mhm.
rather than something show off, to my mind, show
Yeah.
offy.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm not against a beautifully designed dessert, that sort of thing. But food was made to be cut and eaten. So cut it up and eat it. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, right there with it. When we
Okay.
used to have the restaurant that the Dairy Hollow, the book is Dairy Hollow House Soup and Bread, and Dairy Hollow, which by coincidence, I don't live in Eureka Springs where I had the inn and restaurant of Dairy Hollow for many years, but I'm happen to be looking out into this beautiful green valley that is Dairy Hollow as we speak. And there was this moment when you would come out in the dining room. We did sort of country inn style seating, which is just one step away from home. There were two seatings a night. And so everybody, was eating their soup at the same time, their dessert at the same time. And my late husband, Ned, would always say, go on, go out. Come on, people want to say hello. And I would always get grouchy because I was in the cook mode, not the social mode. He'd say, come on, come on. So I'd put clean chef's jacket on or apron and go out. And usually it was around dessert. And when dessert came out, there was usually this sort of moment of silence with the first bite because people liked it so much.
Oh,
And that's my style with food.
okay. All right. You bring up something I was hoping you'd be willing to talk about, and I'm sure you will. Tell the audience a little bit about Dairy Hollow House because it's just the book, really. And so you share it with us.
So I as we speak, I'm 71 years old, and when I started the inn, it I was maybe 30. Um, and so a while back. And my then living husband, Ned Shank, and I, we owned a little tiny house in Dairy Hollow. There was a little tiny house next door to us that was hung up in probate. And Ned believed in what he used to call old-fashioned zoning. You buy it so nobody can do something with it that you don't like. Um, And so at that time, and it's impossible to believe if you've been to Eureka Springs, which is a, Victorian era resort town built up and down mountains, really a treasure for the state of Arkansas and the whole
It
region.
is.
Just a one of a kind place. And I'd lived there for a long time, since my late teens. And at that time, hard to believe, but it was not being promoted too much as like Victorian historic. Tourism was considered the stuff up on the highway, Gerald OK Smith's Passion Play, blah, blah, not too much the other. And Ned was an historic preservationist and believed very much in adaptive reuse, take an old building and give it. And I said, why don't we start like a bed and breakfast in this little farmhouse across the way from us? And so, really, without not knowing what the heck we were doing, we did, except I knew what I wanted it to feel like and taste like and smell like. And Ned had stayed at bed and breakfasts and country inns when he did a year in London when he was in college, and I had in New England and Cape Cod when I was growing up. And so we bought it and started it, and breakfast was, I guess originally we served it. For most of the time we had it, it was delivered in this giant split oak basket made by a family here that has made them for generations. And it was a full breakfast, with everything and more that you could want, right down to like homemade jams in the
Mm.
basket. So people loved the breakfast. And after the inn had been just a country inn and lodgings for a while, we eventually expanded slightly. We bought a second building, and Ned designed and we put on an addition and we ran a restaurant there. And that was the restaurant at Dairy Hollow. And amazingly enough, I had done food writing before, and this, it almost sounds unbelievable when you consider publishing now and AI and all the pressures that are brought to bear on writing and creativity. But the publisher actually sent my then editor, Suzanne Rafer, and her husband down for 3 days to spend the night at the inn. And I think the idea was, would they think that it was book worthy? And they ate at the restaurant. We went out to Beaver Lake. We went through the historic. And at the end, she came up with the concept. She had tasted all the foods on our menus, and she poked around and saw what other books that could be similar were published. And she didn't want a full meal cookbook. She loved our soups and our breads, and they were really good. And then salad to go with that, because that makes a wonderful meal. Good hearty soup, salad, and bread. I probably have that for one meal a day most of the time when I'm at home. And so she came up with that idea, and I went with that. And so the inn was in business in all, I believe, 22 years. And at the end of that time, we considered selling it, but by that time, bed and breakfast inns had proliferated all over Eureka and all over the state of Arkansas.
Mm.
We and one other one were the first two to get. We actually fought the good fight because the health department wanted to zone it as a hotel, and we got it snuck in as, I think, a boarding house. So you didn't have to have the complete. Of course, we did have a complete approved kitchen once we became a restaurant, but um, so we thought about selling it, but we knew a number of people that had sold their inns and were unhappy with what they became with the new owners. And since he and I were idealists and also writers, and we didn't have kids. So we decided to transform it into a nonprofit organization called the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow, which still exists. And in fact, um, that's where I am as we speak. There's a monthly event called Poet Luck there, where there's a featured writer who's a writer in residence, and then local people can read a la sort of a limited time open mic, and the community brings a dish. It's the second Thursday of each month. And this is when we happen to be recording it on a second Thursday. And so so we let go of the inn and let it turn into something else. And it's now been a writer's colony for, I think it's 23 years now. And they have served, I say they just because I'm not on the board and I'm not on, you know, I mean, I'm the co-founder and I love it and I'm rooting for it, but I'm not part of running it anymore.
Mhm.
But so sometimes I say they and sometimes I say we, but it's lovely to be here because I'm in the physical manifestation of a dream that Ned and I shared, and it did evolve. It is still here. And they have now served, I think there's been something like 11,000 writers that have stayed here from many, many different countries. And at the time we started it as a writer's colony, there was not such a spot for retreat and focused artistic work within 36 states. There were a number of them in America, but they were mostly on the East and West Coast. And I loved the Ozarks, and Eureka had been very productive and enriching for me. And so I wanted to pass that on. And not having children, this in a weird way was logical. So it was an inn, and people still come up to me when I go out and, oh, we stayed with you, we had dinner, we had a lot of Thanksgivings with you, and so, as I said in the beginning of the new edition, which is titled Welcome Back to Derry Hollow, in the new edition, how do you invite someone back to a place that no longer exists as such? And that takes one to the magic of what a recipe is. Because even though it is no longer a country inn, you can no longer have a wonderful enchanted meal with us. And he was the front of the house, and he was such a welcoming guy, good looking, funny, easygoing, and people just had a great experience above and beyond the food. And I can't invite you back to that because that no longer exists, other than if you're a writer and you stay at the writers' colony,
Sure.
sort of, kind of.
Mhm.
There's a wonderful chef here who cooks for the writers, but in a recipe, it's like if you make your grandmother's gingerbread or matzo ball soup or fried chicken or whatever, even though she might be gone, assuming that the recipe is good, assuming that you have the equipment, you're still making the tastes of what she made. If your father barbecued, you're in you're in a continuum with them. And when you taste the food, the past merges with the future, and right here and right now, it's still it's still alive. It smells the same way while it's simmering. Whenever I make a soup with dill in it, I am taken back to Saturdays at the home I grew up in, where my mother always made soup and always put fresh dill in it, and the seasons that dill was in season. And, so it is that wonderful thing where, food is very evanescent, but hunger is eternal, and its cessation through food outlasts, any particular moment.
You say something in that, and once again, it's sort of like that Proustian moment where only you bring it up, I think, with smell. Sometimes you can walk into someone's kitchen and you can smell something. It can bring back a memory of something that either you've eaten or something just that had happened, maybe at a party or at a dinner, and it just that whole listening to all the things that have come through my mind. I'm so glad you just said that because it just made me think of that. And just, I'm sure as people that are watching this program will think, oh yes, when you say dill, but let's say pepper or oranges or honey, it just, oh yeah, I can remember when I had or when we were on our honeymoon or this or that. And just, I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate what you've just said. So thank you for, although it wasn't scripted by any means, you know what I mean? I'm trying to compliment you in a way and it's falling apart, but you know what I mean. So
Yes, yes. Thanksgiving, sage, the turkey for I'm
uh,
vegetarian, but I still do stuffing that has sage in it. The smell just takes you back. the first apple pie of every fall.
Mhm.
You go back, the cinnamon, the smell of, the that incredible it's like the scent, even before the taste, it's sort of like a highway to memory and association, as you said.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Something I want to ask you because you are a cook. I always remember, oh, many years ago, Julia Child was on, I don't know if she was on Dick Cavett or, but she was on a show and she was asked about what products would you recommend? And I always remember she said you need like good copper cooking pans or something along those lines. Because you are a cook and you ran a business, you've written a book. If a person wanted to, let's say, not so much go into the business, but just have a good kitchen, what products would you recommend if you want to be a good cook? These are the things I would recommend starting
mm.
out with.
But the first thing that I would comes to mind for me is a cast iron skillet.
Okay.
Um, and I do remember in the restaurant, we used cast iron skillets, and somebody that worked for me for a while who came out of a conventional restaurant background, he wanted lighter skillets because the way that he liked to do vegetables was blanch them in advance and then sort of toss them in a lot of butter and do that thing where you have a light pan and you just sort of you make that sharp forward and backward motion and toss them in it. We didn't exactly cook that way, and we had mostly cast iron skillets, and he was complaining to me that the cast iron skillet was too heavy to do that. And I remember his nickname was Catfish, and I said, Catfish? Those cast iron skillets are our employee fitness program. But I love a cast iron skillet. They really do, hold the heat like nothing else. And the more you use them, the better they get. And they kind of become sort of semi non-stick
Okay.
after a while with just a little bit of oil in them. And of course, the best cornbreads in the world, and the one we served at the inn. And I wrote a later book called Cornbread Gospels, at the present out of print, but a wonderful book and a wonderful topic. The world beater cornbreads all have either butter or, some people prefer bacon fat. I like butter and oil. In the bottom of the skillet, you heat the skillet on the stove or in the oven. You pour the batter into the hot pan with its fat in the bottom and then stick it in the oven. And then, of course, you have that crisp underneath of it that just, you know, Yankees who I don't think know very much about cornbread. Um, in Cornbread Gospels, the first chapter is called Soul in a Skillet. Um, and it's about Southern cornbreads. And then I tried to be unprejudiced in the cookbook, but the second chapter was called, there's a kind of corn, very thin corn pancake that is made in Rhode Island and in New England. It's about the only place in the North where people are as fanatic about cornbread as they are down here. And it's called a Johnny cake. And you're not allowed to spell Johnny by, as I remember, by legislation in the Rhode Island thing. You're not allowed to spell Johnny and Johnny cake with an H. So chapter 2 was called What the H is a Johnny Cake and Other Yankee Hanky Panky. So I had fun with that.
Uh,
But so cast iron skillet is the first thing that comes to mind. Second thing is good knives and keep them sharp. Get them
okay.
sharpened
Mhm.
every couple of weeks. About the one high tech thing that I use pretty regularly is I use a food processor for
Okay.
pureeing and stuff. Um, I also make, and we used to serve at the inn's restaurant, cold brew coffee. Now it's hot coffee, but you make, instead of pouring boiling water over the hot coffee grounds and getting it quickly, you pour good water, meaning filtered water, non, you know, good tasting water,
Uh-huh.
uh, cold over the coffee grounds and let them steep overnight. And so you end up with a concentrate of coffee to which you add boiling water. And it's no acid. It's very low acid. So a lot of people who have stomach problems with regular coffee and love the taste, but have to give it up because they don't have that. But even if you have no problems, it tastes more like itself without being overrun by the acidity. So there are setups for cold brew coffee things, and I use one to this day. My present husband is so thrilled with cold brew coffee, and I am too. And so those are a few of the things that come to mind. But the
Okay.
real tool is probably not a physical thing as much as when you go in the kitchen, you get kind of focused on what you're doing. And, you know, I don't want to be woo-woo. And, certainly I can make good things to eat when I'm not in a good mood, but I like thinking about the people that are going to eat it and feeling, you know, in the groove with the ingredients, which after all, they're the connection to the whole world. Even one of the things I think is no one ever eats alone. Even if you're by yourself eating something out of a can, somebody raised that food, somebody
Yes.
canned it, somebody designed the label, somebody brought it to the groceries and put it on the shelf and rang it up for you. And, you are always connected when you eat, even if you're not conscious of it. So when you're conscious of it, whether in preparing it, serving it, eating it, it adds a dimension that some might call intellectual or relational, some might call spiritual. But you have a lot of company when you eat, even if you're by yourself.
Okay. All right. Because this is a 30th edition of your book, have you noticed, and I'm sure maybe you have you noticed any significant changes in American, how do I want to put this? Changes in the way we cook or foods that were very popular 30 years ago, they're just almost taboo now, or things that you've noticed in the 30-year history, you know? Because let's say like 40, 50 years ago, maybe high fat diets, or maybe cocoa was in, but maybe cocoa's not in now. You know what I mean? I
Right,
can't get
right.
precise, but I think you know what I'm trying to get at.
Well, first of all, America there's a lovely book by a man named David Camp called The United States of Arugula. And it sort of tracks the changes in access to ingredients that we have now. When my mother was still alive, and I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s, and I came to visit her in New York, and she said, I'm going to take you to a restaurant. And they had the best salad green that I've ever had in my life. And she took me, and it was arugula. And now you can get arugula everywhere. There was
Mm,
one restaurant in New York that had it at this was probably, oh, maybe 1985. And even though it's a standard Italian salad green, it was not American. So there are many, many more ingredients that we have access to, and much of that, the credit goes to farmers market and the farmers market movement. In the introduction to the new part, I wrote a section about things that are newer, and it was at the time that I wrote it, low fat cooking was kind of the thing that a lot of people did. And so, I would probably use a tiny bit more fat in most of the recipes now, but not a lot because
okay.
you don't need that much if you cook attentively. You can get by with a little bit less of the things that are densely caloric sometimes or high sugar or now one thing that is hilarious to me is it was the time when one of the in ingredients was raspberry vinegar. Now you can get like a rainbow of different fruit vinegars that are out there. And balsamic was not widely known or available, both the real balsamic and the bastardized versions that there are umpteen zillions of. Um, so, there's a few recipes that use raspberry vinegar, a few more than I would use today. Um, and so, things change, but, as far as soup goes as a course, it's so malleable, it's so flexible. You don't like it thick, you add some more stock or broth. You, you can always add more or less. It's very forgiving.
Okay.
I'm friends with the cookbook writer Rose Levy Berenbaum, who we did an event with in October. There's a very fine cooking school called Brightwater in Northwest Arkansas, and she and I did an event at Brightwater. And Rose is so precise in her baking measurements. She really does get reproducible results, which is the gold standard of any recipe. And she measures things not just by volume, 1 cup. She measures it by weight,
Mm.
and she is precise, precision cooking, and her recipes are very fine. And if you follow them the way she says it, and you measure, you will get those results. Whereas, soup is kind of more laissez-faire.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a good baker, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not as precise as she is, but I'm not in the class that she
Okay.
is.
Okay.
However, soup is very forgiving and easygoing, so probably matches me a little bit temperamentally as well. And
Okay.
you can also always feed more people. You add some more things, people show up unexpectedly, and
Okay. All right. Well, Crescent, this has been fabulous. I've really enjoyed it. Um, if people want to contact you or if they want to buy any of your books, how can they reach you or where can they buy your books?
um, of course, the Scarlet A, but also, of course, I love my local bookstores. And in Little Rock, Wordsworth has been very generous and kind to me over the years. And in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Pearl's Books is great. And there are new, for a while, it looked like we were going to lose bookstores, but they've been coming back, the independents. So I encourage everyone to spend time at their independence as well as at the chain, as well as or in preference to the chains and the onlines. Of course, the onlines are very convenient, and that's
Mhm.
wonderful. Now to hang out more with me, my website is dragonwagon.com, and there are recipes there and blog posts and this and that. I am all over Facebook, and
Okay.
on Facebook it's C Dragonwagon. On Instagram it's C Dragonwagon. I don't do Twitter or X. I just don't.
Okay.
But you can find those there. Every so often I'll do a video and smack it up there. There's also, I teach writing because I write in several genres besides culinary. Also on Facebook, if you go to Crescent Dragonwagon's Fearless Writing, you can find specifically writing related stuff there.
Okay.
And so I'm not that hard to find.
I have one more question.
Yes,
Do
sir.
you have a favorite meal? I mean, if
Ah,
you were stuck on a desert island or you were a prisoner who was going to be executed and you had one meal you could eat left, what would you eat?
I'm so much a mood eater that and the one great privilege of being a decent cook is that um, when I have the taste for something, I can usually go make it.
Okay.
So pasta is often a comfort food for me. In the introduction to this, I went chapter by chapter and explained that I still make them and or what I do differently. There's a black bean soup there that I mentioned several times that was taught to me by one of my mentors, Elsie Friend, a WPA era artist who lived in Eureka with her husband Louis. And it is so simple and so good and so satisfying. So very often, I make that soup probably more often than anyone in the book. However, there are other bean soups with a pan of cornbread. Many people, when they come to visit me, I'll say, is there anything particular you want or you don't even? Whatever you do, make your cornbread with it. And that cornbread is in that recipe. But there's also a weird soup in there. And I remember that I say in the introduction to that recipe, trust me on this, it sounds weird, but essentially it is in the book, as written in the original, it's a pasta that is cooked in broth and cooked with yogurt, and then you put Parmesan on the end, and it's like a lightweight, tangy, to me, much more interesting than the Alfredo kind of thing, much lighter, much fresher. And these days, I also sometimes do that with less broth and make it as a pasta comfort food kind of thing. That's really good to me. Garlic almost always tastes good to me. I put garlic in a lot of things. So there's a garlic pasta that I make. But somewhat it really is a movable feast. Um, in the seasons, there's an asparagus and cheddar cheese soup with white wine in there. I've already made it this spring. There's, not a spring that goes by that I don't think of it and most times make it. And now we're into strawberries. So there's strawberry soup and strawberry shortcake. And by the way, for those of you who are strawberry shortcake people, try making a strawberry shortcake. And instead of doing it in biscuits, the Southern way, or sponge cake, the East Coast way, try doing a strawberry shortcake on a big skillet of cornbread that's split in half and put a ton of strawberries in the middle and the whipped cream on top. And it's hard to go back to other shortcakes after you've had a shortcake done on cornbread. So,
All right. Well, thank you so much. It has
you are
been a
so
pleasure
welcome.
interviewing you. Thank you for being on this program. All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in reading Dairy Hollow House Soup and Bread, you can check it out from the library or purchase it wherever books are sold. For more information, please visit dragonwagon.com or our website at nlrlibrary.org. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time, and have a great afternoon.